She was panting like a dog that had just been chasing a rabbit. She thought to herself, I can rest for a few seconds and gather my strength. Push! She heard someone shout. She was getting tired of all this pushing they kept asking her to do. Heck, she had been doing it for the past 2 hours. This baby just doesn't want to be born, she thought as she gathered all her might and pushed as hard as she could. Someone kept saying, I can see the head, and she felt that it was way past time to see the head. They better get that baby out now or else she will get up and go to another hospital. How could they not know how to yank a baby out when it was time for it to be born? Bunch of useless doctors and nurses. She had things to do as soon as she was done with this baby thing. There were chores to be done, and the madam was probably crazy mad that she still hadn't got back after she left the floor wet with soapy water to come here. As long as the madam did not find out that she had peed on the floor, she would not be stuck raving mad and try to kill her like the last time. The high-pitched sound of her baby crying brought her back to the present with a frightening jolt, as if she was not expecting it, and she jumped. There was a flurry of movement all around her, and someone said there was a code blue or the baby was blue, and everyone seemed to just panic and scurry in and out of the room as if a firecracker was burning up there behind. The screaming thing was taken out of the room, and the screams could be heard fading into the background, and she doubled back to where she felt intense heat, as if someone was setting fire to her most sensitive and private part. The doctor was sewing something down there because she could see a hint of something attached to a string emerge every few seconds. She tried to get up to take a closer look at what was happening down there, but it seemed something was making it impossible for her to raise herself to a sitting position. She whipped her head to the left and saw a man holding her down, and then to the right, and still another man was holding her down. Why were they holding her down? She needed to put out the fire that was burning down there. Can't these people see that I'm burning? Why are they standing there holding me down while I'm on fire? She wondered. They must be trying to kill me. This sent her into a panic, and she started struggling to get herself free. The doctor swore, but the burning still continued. She decided to ask someone to help. Can someone put out the fire? There was no response, so she thought maybe they didn't hear her and repeated it again. The two guys holding her down looked at each other and seemed to be thinking that maybe there is a fire, and they loosened their pressure on her, and she took this opportunity to raise herself up, and the doctor screamed at someone or something. The suddenness of her movements caused a sharp pain to shoot somewhere in the vicinity of her head, and she thought that maybe she had banged her head on something, so she looked up in front of her, but there was nothing. One of the nurses heard her say that there was a fire and said to the doctor that she had said she had seen a fire, and the doctor told them that there was no fire, just the pain she was feeling from being sutured. What? What in the name of all that was decent did that mean? She wanted to ask, but she decided to look down there to make sure that there was really no fire there. There was just so much blood, and she plopped back down on the bed as she fainted. She woke up as if she was coming from a nightmare, or had been woken by a remembrance of something urgent she had forgotten to do. She looked around and saw that she was in a very strange place, and she had no idea where she was or how she had gotten there. I got to get home and finish cleaning that floor. The madam will surely kill me when she finds out that I have been sleeping and haven't even finished my chores yet. She seemed not to remember why she had not finished cleaning the floor. She started to get out of bed, but the pain stopped her in her tracks. She tried to figure out where the pain was coming from, but it seemed to just be all over. Someone came into the room and started speaking to her, but she could not make sense of the gibberish this lady was saying to her. I have to get home, but I can't seem to walk 'cause it hurts. She said this to no one in particular, but she just felt the urgency to get home and finish cleaning the floor. Another person came in wearing clothing similar to the ones worn by the first person to come in, and they also had some cord around their neck with some silver thing at the end of it. They started talking to one another, ignoring her mumblings about getting home and the pain, and she decided to close her eyes to rest them a bit because they were feeling heavy all of a sudden. She was having a dream, and in the dream there was a tiled room with a wet floor, and there was urine all over the room. There was also something screaming that sounded like a baby crying, and she was scrubbing with all her might to clean the floor and get rid of all the traces of urine, because she had a feeling that if she didn't, she would be in a whole heap of trouble. She was just about to wipe the last drop of that pee when a gigantic woman entered the room, wearing the meanest look on her face and looking straight down at her. Her foot was so big that every time she lifted it to get closer, it seemed like she was going to squash her underneath it. Her heart started pounding as a giant hand fast approached her where she was kneeling. She opened her eyes suddenly, and the woman was gone, but still her heart was beating like it was trying to break free from her chest. She put her right hand, palm down, over it as if to stop it from getting out. She closed her eyes, and after a moment opened them, ever so slowly. She had an uneasy feeling about something, but for the moment she could not remember what it could be. There was someone doing something on her left side. She looked to see a man was fiddling with the machine that she could see close to where she was lying. Can I have a drink of water? Of course, the man replied and came close to her and held her chin with his one hand while guiding a clear cup to her lips. She was so thirsty and she tried to drink a big gulp, but she choked and started coughing. Take it easy, the voice was saying in such a kind temperament, and a tear trickled down her face from her left eye. He calmed her down once again, assisted her to take another sip. This time she took a small sip and swallowed, and then another. The man was now saying, that's the way to do it. The water was finished all too soon, but before she could ask for more, he was guiding another cupful to her lips. He was so gentle and his hand was so soft underneath her chin. She wished she could lean against it and feel it brush her cheek. She must have fallen asleep, because when she woke, the room was empty. She looked around the room. There was that machine that she remembered someone fussing with just before she fell asleep. And she could also see a plastic-looking container that had something like water inside it. And at the top end of it was a metal hook where it was hooked. And the bottom end of it had a long tube that seemed to extend to the floor. She leaned over to see where it ended. When she moved, the tube was swung into motion also, and she felt a pain on the inside of her arm, somewhere in the elbow region. She looked there and saw that a tube seemed to be coming out of there. She was wondering why that was when the doctor came into the room and started speaking to her. "Good morning. How are you feeling?" was what he said. She felt confused at the question and was quiet for some moments. When she spoke, she did not answer his question. Instead, she wanted to know where she was and why he said it was morning. "Well, you have been with us here at the hospital for the past 3 days now. You have a daughter who has been waiting for you to give her a name and..." Her mind was reeling. What the devil he was talking about? She's been here for 3 days. Surely the madam would not have allowed such a thing to happen. She still had the floor to finish cleaning and the cooking, because it would be supper time soon and the madam does not like to wait for her dinner. She normally wants to get started on her drinking as early as possible. I wonder if she knows where I am. The feeling of something being placed in her arms took her out of her train of thought, and she refocused her attention on what was happening. She remembered the doctor mentioning something about a baby, and when she looked down, she must have sat up because she was holding a baby in her arms. She adjusted her so that she could see her properly. She was beautiful. She had blue eyes and a hint of red hair. She had a nose like an English woman she met once at the madam's house. The lady had been the most beautiful person she had ever seen. The more she thought about her, and the more she thought this little maiden looked just like her. The doctor was telling her that she needs to bond with the child and that the baby had been waiting 2 days to be breastfed. The nurse that seemed to have just materialized, she did not remember her being there originally, was suddenly close to her, positioning the baby next to her left breast. The doctor left the room at that moment, and the nurse told her to take her breast out and put the tit in the baby's mouth. While she did this, the nurse was saying, "What are you going to call her?" She thought for a moment. "I don't know. I haven't thought about it. I didn't even know I was supposed to give someone a name." The nurse decided to get a better understanding of this. "What is your name?" That seemed to confuse her, but only for a moment. "Elizabeth." "And your last name?" "McFallen." The nurse smiled and said, "You have a beautiful name, Elizabeth." She mumbled a thank you. She decided to ask the nurse something. "Last time when I was awake, there was a man who came in to check on me and he was dressed in similar clothes to what you're wearing. He gave me a drink of water. Do you know who it was and if I will get a chance to thank him before I go?" The nurse took the baby out of her arms. She realized then that she had fallen asleep. "That was probably McIntyre. His shift starts at noon today, but you're not leaving the hospital today." The nurse left with the baby and she was left alone with her thoughts. She decided that it was time her mind remembered the last 3 days of her life and filling in the gaps she seemed to have in her memory. She did not remember giving birth, but she remembered a fire to her shishi. If the baby was hers, then she could not be sure who the father was because she was raped by both her master and his brother-in-law. The madam's brother had attacked her some weeks after the master, when he had come visiting, and then a falling out had ensued when he wanted to take Elizabeth to go work for him, and the master refused and told him to never set foot at their farm again. Elizabeth had been relieved to never have to worry about another attack. Her master had saved her unknowingly. Whoever the baby's father was, he had to be a person related to that woman, seeing that the baby looked so much like her. She didn't remember if she was keeping the baby. She remembers overhearing the madam saying that she could not keep that baby because it would bring shame to the family. She wondered how that beautiful child could ever be shamed. Heck, hadn't she been the one raped? That woman did not know what she was talking about because when she saw the baby, she felt no shame, just an overwhelming feeling of blessing. With all the hardships of her life, she was thinking that if they were all in preparation of this little one's arrival, she could forgive all and move on with her life. She would love that baby like no baby had ever been loved before. As the nurse had said he would, McIntyre was in to check on her at 1:30. "Hi," he said, smiling. "You are looking much better today." She felt so shy seeing him, because he seemed more handsome than she even remembered him. "I feel much better. I wanted to say thank you for all your help. You are welcome. Are you comfortable, or would you like me to prop your pillows for you? This made the blood rush to her face, and because her skin was dark, she was the only one who knew about it. The nurse was looking at her expectantly, and she realized that she hadn't responded to his question. She decided to nod her head yes, because she was suddenly afraid that if she opened her mouth to speak, she would embarrass herself even further. He was so close to her while propping her pillows, and because he asked her to raise herself, she found that she was almost touching him and could feel her own breath deflect back to her face from his chest. He smelled so good, but she just could not recognize what kind of smell it was. His nails were so clean and immaculate. She remembered the touch and yearned for it again. All too soon he was done. He gently pushed her back down on the bed, and this triggered a buried memory in her mind. She closed her eyes tight and braced herself for what she thought was coming. He noticed her reaction and thought that he had hurt her. In some way he had, because he awoke in her a feeling of terror so great that she shut down. "Open your eyes?" He said it like a question. "Did I hurt you?" The concern in his voice made her to slowly open them. He was still close to her, but he was not touching her. "Are you alright?" he repeated. She bobbed her head up and down in 3 rapid motions, but a tear rolled down her cheek. He was witnessing this display of emotion for the second time now, and he wondered why she cried every time he was there. He did not like how that made him feel, so he thought that if he spoke to her about her baby, she would relax again. "Your daughter is beautiful. What's her name?" She did not respond right away, and he was making his way out when she whispered, "She is named after you." He turned back and walked towards her in slow steps, pondering what he had just heard. "What's my name?" he asked. "I don't know it yet. I was hoping you would tell me." He chuckled, and she responded with a shy smile of her own. "My name is Jordan. Are you sure you want your little girl to go through life with that name?" The smile turned into a giggle, and she nodded. She loved the name already and thought her little girl would love it too.